Krumlauf. The German military faced a brutal reality in the narrow alleyways of Stalingrad, where urban warfare became a death trap and snipers lurked around every corner. To counter this, engineers developed the Krumlauf, a specialized curved barrel attachment that turned a standard STG-44 into a weapon capable of shooting around 90-degree bends. It featured a high-tech periscope sight, allowing a soldier to stay completely concealed while engaging targets in a blind spot. Engineering such a device required defying the standard principles of ballistics.
The most common version, the Vorsatz J, had a 30-degree bend, while the Vorsatz P was designed for tank crews to clear infantry from the vehicle's blind spots using a 90-degree curve. To prevent the barrel from exploding, designers had to drill tiny vent holes along the curve to bleed off the immense gas pressure generated by the 7.92 by 33 quartz rounds. The internal physics of this weapon produced a truly shocking result during field testing. As the lead bullet struck the curved wall of the steel barrel at supersonic speeds, the centrifugal force was so violent that the projectile would frequently shatter into fragments.
This transformed a precision assault rifle into a makeshift shotgun, spraying lead shards that were lethal at short range but lacked any aerodynamic stability for distant engagements. Ultimately, the Krumlauf was a mechanical failure that proved the limits of desperate innovation. The friction was so intense that the lifespan of a 30-degree barrel was limited to just 300 rounds, while the 90-degree versions failed even sooner. It remains a fascinating relic of a regime that tried to bypass the laws of nature to save a losing war effort.
Goliath tracked mine. Long before the era of modern drone warfare, German engineers introduced the SDKFZ-302, more commonly known as the Goliath. This miniature tracked vehicle was essentially a mobile demolition charge designed to carry up to 60 kilograms of high explosives directly into the heart of enemy fortifications or tank formations. Operated via a joystick control box, it allowed a soldier to remain under cover while sending this mechanimobile crawling across no man's land at a speed of about 6 miles per hour.
The technical ambition behind the Goliath was staggering for the 1940s, featuring either electric motors in early models or reliable gasoline engines in later versions. However, its sophisticated design harbored a fatal low-tech flaw that doomed its effectiveness on the battlefield. While the internal machinery was a marvel of miniaturization, the entire 400-kilogram vehicle relied on a fragile 650-foot triple-strand cable trailing behind it, a literal umbilical cord that enemy infantry could easily sever with a simple pair of wire cutters or a well-placed bayonet strike.
Once this wire was cut, the expensive machine became nothing more than a stationary metal box filled with explosives. Beyond its vulnerability, the Goliath struggled with the harsh reality of combat terrain. Its low ground clearance meant that even a moderately sized rock or a thick patch of mud could high-center the vehicle, rendering it immobile before it reached its target. Despite over 7,500 units being produced, the high cost of 1,000 Reichsmarks per unit provided very little return on investment, making it one of the most expensive and least reliable tools in the Nazi arsenal.
Kugelpanzer. Among the vast collection of captured German technology, none remains more enigmatic or visually jarring than the Kugelpanzer, or ball tank. This bizarre vehicle consists of a central cylindrical compartment for a single driver, sandwiched between two large rotating hemispherical tracks that provide movement. Only one prototype exists today, captured by the Red Army at the Kummersdorf testing grounds in 1945, and it continues to baffle historians because nearly all technical documentation regarding its development was destroyed before the war ended. The vehicle's layout suggests a specialized, albeit flawed, role in reconnaissance or cable laying. It was powered by a small single-cylinder two-stroke engine and featured a tiny viewing slit at the front, offering the pilot a dangerously narrow field of vision while encased in just 5 mil of armored plating. This thin skin was barely enough to stop 7.62 mil small arms fire and would have been completely useless against even the lightest anti-tank rifles of the era, which could penetrate over 20 mil of steel.
The most baffling aspect of the Kugelpanzer is its total lack of tactical viability. With a single stabilizing wheel at the rear and a total weight of approximately 1.8 tons, the vehicle would have been prone to tipping and nearly impossible to steer on uneven ground. This fundamental instability, combined with its agonizingly slow speed of just 5 miles per hour, meant it could never keep pace with the high-speed blitzkrieg tactics Germany relied upon. It stands as a silent witness to a period where Nazi design shifted from practical engineering to a desperate search for miracle shapes, resulting in a machine that was too weird to live in and too poorly designed to fight.
Wind cannon. The wind cannon, or wind cannon, was a product of the desperate search for anti-aircraft solutions that did not rely on traditional ammunition. Developed by a factory in Stuttgart, this bizarre weapon used a chemical reaction between hydrogen and oxygen to create a high-pressure explosion. This blast was then funneled through a 3-foot-wide L-shaped tube, projecting a concentrated plug of compressed air toward the sky. The theoretical goal was to create an artificial whirlwind capable of snapping the fragile wooden and aluminum wings of Allied bombers like the B-17. During initial trials, the results were deceptively promising. At a range of approximately 200 yards, the wind cannon successfully shattered 1-inch-thick wooden boards, proving it possessed significant kinetic energy at ground level. However, the laws of fluid dynamics quickly turned this Wunderwaffe into an expensive embarrassment. Once the air slug traveled beyond the controlled environment of the test range, the lack of a physical projectile meant the air quickly lost its cohesion and velocity, dissipating into a harmless breeze before it could reach the altitudes where Allied aircraft actually flew. Despite its obvious flaws, the German military actually deployed a single unit on a bridge over the Elbe River late in the war. It saw zero combat success. The sheer scale of the 35-foot-long barrel made it an easy target for pilots, yet they didn't even need to destroy it. The weapon simply could not fight the atmosphere itself. It remains one of the most eccentric examples of how Nazi Germany tried to weaponize the very air we breathe, only to be defeated by basic physics. V3 Supergun. Hidden beneath a massive concrete dome in the hills of Mimoyex, France, lay the most ambitious artillery project of World War II, the V3 London gun. Unlike traditional cannons, the V3 utilized a multi-stage acceleration process along its staggering 430-foot-long barrel. Dozens of lateral combustion chambers were positioned at intervals to electrically timed charges. This high-pressure pump was designed to rain 3,000 shells Rauer from over 100 miles away, propelled by a projected muzzle velocity of 1,500 meters per second. Each 140-kilogram shell was fin-stabilized, looking more like a modern dart than a traditional artillery round. However, the project was plagued by a catastrophic synchronization flaw. If a single side chamber ignited even a fraction of a millisecond out of sequence, the pressure would backflow, causing the barrel to rupture. If you're fascinated by these terrifying engineering failures, hit the subscribe button now to join our journey through the darkest secrets of World War II history. Engineers failed to solve this instability, even after firing over 250 test rounds, leaving the weapon a fragile giant. Allied intelligence eventually discovered the massive site and launched Operation Aphrodite to destroy it. In July 1944, British tall-boy earthquake bombs slammed into the limestone hills, collapsing the tunnels and burying the V3 forever before it could fire a single shot at London. The Germans built 2 smaller versions to shell Luxembourg, but they were a shadow of the original plan. It remains a grim reminder that even the most terrifying superweapon is useless if it cannot survive its own mechanical complexity. Messerschmitt Me-163 Comet. The Messerschmitt Me-163 Comet was the world's only operational rocket-powered fighter, representing a desperate leap into aviation's future. This tailless interceptor climbed to 30,000 feet in under 4 minutes, hitting 596 miles per hour. However, its performance relied on a volatile chemical cocktail of T-Stoff and C-Stoff. These substances ignited spontaneously on contact, often turning the aircraft into a flying bomb before it ever reached the enemy. The true nightmare for pilots was the fuel's corrosive nature. T-Stoff, a concentrated hydrogen peroxide, was so toxic it dissolved human flesh instantly. If the Comet suffered a rough landing, common due to its lack of traditional wheels, any leakage would literally melt the pilot alive inside the cockpit. Since the engine provided only 8 minutes of thrust, pilots became helpless gliders once fuel ran out, making them easy prey. The Me-163 managed only 16 confirmed victories, losing far more units to its own instability than to Allied fire.
The Comet was an aerodynamic masterpiece, but a safety catastrophe. Ground crews required specialized rubber suits, and the plane used a detachable dolly for takeoff, landing on a simple underbelly skid. With only 370 units produced, it remains a grim reminder of a regime willing to sacrifice elite pilots to experimental technology that threatened the user as much as the target.
Horten HO-229. As the war neared its end, the Luftwaffe debuted the Horten HO-229, a radical flying wing resembling an alien spacecraft. Designed by the Horten brothers, it eliminated the fuselage and tail, using its bat-like shape to minimize drag. Powered by two Junkers Jumo 004 jets, it aimed for 600 miles per hour and a 49,000-foot ceiling, flying far above Allied interceptors. Its construction made the HO-229 a precursor to modern stealth. The airframe used wood and a charcoal-infused glue intended to absorb radar waves, making it nearly invisible to British radar stations. This primitive stealth, combined with immense speed, was designed to let the HO-229 penetrate deep into enemy territory and drop 2,000 pounds of bombs before defenders could even react. It was a 21st century concept born prematurely in a world of crumbling resources. The HO-229 never saw combat as German industry collapsed. Only 3 prototypes were built. The third was captured by Americans during Operation Paperclip. The lack of strategic metals forced the use of plywood, which often failed under the heat of primitive jet engines.
Today, the last surviving HO-229 sits in the Smithsonian, a ghostly relic of a future that might have existed if the Reich hadn't run out of time and sanity. Schrever Gustav. The Schrever Gustav remains the absolute pinnacle of artillery excess, a weapon so massive it redefined the boundaries of modern mechanical engineering. Built by the Krupp firm, this 1,350-ton behemoth was designed solely to obliterate the French Maginot Line. Its 100-foot barrel hurled 7-ton concrete-piercing shells, roughly the weight of a fully grown African elephant, to a staggering distance of 29 miles. Moving this giant required 2 parallel railway tracks, creating a mobile fortress that could only travel where specialized heavy infrastructure had been painstakingly pre-installed.
Logistically, the Gustav was an utter catastrophe for a nation fighting on multiple fronts. A single gun required a dedicated major general and 2,500 soldiers for assembly, track laying, and constant anti-aircraft defense. The firing rate was abysmal. It managed only 14 shells daily due to the immense physical strain on the metal. During the 1942 siege of Sevastopol, it fired 48 rounds and successfully destroyed an undersea ammunition magazine buried 30 meters deep. But the barrel wore out so quickly that the multi-million Reichsmark machine was immediately sent back for repairs.
Ultimately, Gustav fell victim to its own magnitude and the shifting tides of war. It was too slow for modern maneuvers and far too vulnerable to Allied airstrikes. By its second planned deployment, the Soviet army was already advancing, and the Germans destroyed their prized possession to prevent its capture. It stands today as a haunting symbol of a regime prioritizing psychological intimidation over practical battlefield utility, proving that being the biggest often leads to becoming the most useless.
Land Cruiser P-1000 Rat. In 1942, German engineers proposed the Land Cruiser P-1000 Rat, arguably the most absurd and terrifying land vehicle ever conceived by human imagination. This land cruiser would have weighed a jaw-dropping 1,000 metric tons, more than 5 times the weight of the heaviest tank ever built, the Panzer VIII Maus. The plan involved mounting a massive naval turret from Gneisenau-class battleships onto a 115-foot hull. Armed with twin 280mm guns, the Rat possessed enough raw firepower to obliterate entire city blocks with a single devastating salvo.
To move this iron mountain, designers planned to use 2 24-cylinder U-boat diesel engines producing a combined 16,000 horsepower. However, basic physics doomed the project from the very first blueprint. The Rat was so heavy it would have pulverized any road surface and collapsed every bridge in Europe, forcing it to ford deep rivers, while its 36-foot height made it an impossible-to-hide target for every Allied bomber in the sky. It was a design that completely ignored the reality of terrain and air superiority.
Minister Albert Speer wisely canceled the insanity in 1943 before a single prototype was finished. Had it been built, the Ratid would have been a slow-moving, fuel-hungry coffin for its 20-man crew, burning thousands of gallons of precious fuel just to crawl at 25 miles per hour. It represents the final, delusional stage of Nazi giantism, where the desperate pursuit of sheer size blinded the military leadership to the tactical realities of a war won by speed, mass production, and flexible air power.
Sun gun. The most surreal concept in the Nazi arsenal was the Sonnengewehr, or sun gun. This project aimed to place a 9-square-kilometer parabolic weir into geostationary orbit 5,100 miles above Earth. Constructed from reflective metallic sodium, this orbital weapon would capture raw solar energy, focusing it into a lethal beam directed at ground targets. The theoretical power of this space gun could incinerate metropolises, vaporize reservoirs, or boil sections of the ocean in minutes.
Technical blueprints originated from physicist Hermann Oberth, who initially conceived the mirror for peaceful purposes before the military repurposed it. To maintain the station, Germans planned a manned outpost where crews lived in pressurized modules using centrifugal force for gravity. The project's scale was its undoing, as engineers calculated it required 50 to 100 years of constant launches and astronomical resources to assemble, a timeline far outlasting the collapsing Third Reich.
Ultimately, the sun gun remained a terrifying fever dream of a regime refusing defeat. When Allied officers interrogated German scientists after the war, they were stunned to find the Nazis believed this sci-fi weapon was a practical future possibility. It stands as the ultimate symbol of military hubris, where ambition detached from reality to pursue godlike destruction capable of burning the world from the stars.